Hello, everyone. It's good to be here today. Let me start by sharing my screen. The first thing that I would like you all to do, if you can, is locate an article. This is an article that I wrote a couple of years ago, and we're going to reference a specific page, actually Appendix A in the article. I thought it might be helpful for you to have it handy. You can see the citation for the article here on the screen. If you want to do a search, you can search, is it teacher leadership? I believe that Dr. Skousen is going to put the URL in the chat, so you can just click on that. And I've also created a QR code for you. A couple of different places in the presentation that QR code will show. So if you have trouble locating the article, don't panic. You'll be able to do this without having it at your fingertips. And I actually have a screen that shows Appendix A if you want to just wait for that later in the presentation. So the topic that I was asked to speak on today is exploring your leadership potential. And we have a few different objectives for the presentation over the next 30 minutes or so. The first thing that you all will be doing is using the 5 features of Teacher Leadership Framework and Self-Determination Guide to self-assess an act of teacher leadership. Then you'll consider the validity of the framework. And finally, we'll take an opportunity to discuss practical applications for using the framework. So I'm going to put you to work for a few minutes. I'm going to give you about 3 minutes. And during this time, what I would like you to do is think of a recent act of teacher leadership. This can be an act that you yourself have experienced or demonstrated. It might be an act of leadership that you have observed or witnessed. It might be very recent. It might be something from a long time ago, but I want you to try to think of one specific act of teacher leadership. Take a few minutes to write down a complete description of what happened and provide as much detail as you can. I encourage you, rather than just to think about it, to make notes or even write it out in paragraph form, whether you're writing longhand or typing into a Word document. Take a few minutes to tell the story and write about that leadership opportunity. I am going to turn on my stopwatch. We'll take about 3 minutes, and then we'll resume the presentation. Go ahead and begin. About 30 more seconds. All right. Hopefully you can find a stopping point. What we're going to do is set aside that description for just a little while, and I want to talk with you a little bit about the 5 features of teacher leadership framework and how to use it. And then later in the presentation, we'll be coming back to the descriptions that you've written down. So let's begin with the never-ending problem in teacher leadership. For those of us who have been studying it for a while, no single definition, framework, or rubric for teacher leadership is commonly accepted. In fact, teacher leadership has been described in terms of influence, roles and responsibilities, functions, competencies, skill sets, worldviews, and social networks. Each of these perspectives offers valuable contributions, but the multiple conceptions make it difficult, especially for practicing teachers, to apply the research to their daily practice. The 5 features of teacher leadership framework asserts that every act of teacher leadership has 5 core features in common. Teacher leadership is student-centered, action-oriented, beyond one classroom, a positive influence, and collaborative. So let's unpack each of these features. Teacher leadership is student-centered because the ultimate objective is student learning and well-being. Teacher leadership is action-oriented because it involves hands-on effort and engagement toward a specific purpose. Teacher leadership is beyond one classroom because teacher leadership involves, affects, and/or benefits students across classrooms, grade levels, teams, schools, and/or school districts. Teacher leadership is a positive influence because it benefits students, builds relationships, and encourages participation. And finally, teacher leadership is collaborative because teachers must work together with others to accomplish tasks, address challenges, and resolve problems. This is a visual of the framework. We're going to come back to this in just a little while. So let's talk a little bit about the underlying assumptions of the 5 features of teacher leadership. First of all, acts of teacher leadership take place at the individual level. Therefore, the framework's primary unit of analysis is a single teacher leadership experience. So we're talking about acts of teacher leadership. We're not talking about teacher leaders themselves. Second, students and their families are the exclusive clients or customers of schools. Therefore, acts of teacher leadership must render direct and/or indirect benefits to students. And third, teacher leadership is both interactive and influential. Therefore, analyzing acts of teacher leadership must consider positive influence, collaboration, and scope of impact. This brings us to a definition, one of many, but a definition of teacher leadership. Teacher leadership is an action-oriented, collaborative process through which effective teachers positively influence student learning and well-being beyond one classroom. Now that we've talked a little bit about the framework itself, let's talk a little bit about using the framework. And in order to understand how this framework can be used, we turn to self-determination theory. This is a theory that has been developed over several decades by Deci and Ryan. Ryan and Deci, they wrote a detailed book on this theory in 2017, and I think it really helps to understand leadership development and specifically how teacher leaders go about developing from teachers into leaders. Self-determination theory is about intrinsic motivation and how our intrinsic motivators help us to grow and change and adapt. The three determining factors or self-motivators that make up self-determination are connection, competence, and autonomy. So let's consider these three motivators in terms of teachers and teacher leadership. When a teacher is self-motivated by connection, that person has a sense of belonging, attachment, or commitment to other people. When a teacher has an internal motivation toward competence, that person believes they possess the knowledge and skills necessary to take some kind of intentional action. When a teacher is motivated by autonomy, that person feels in control of their actions and their decisions. So, based on self-determination theory, it is possible that some teachers develop as leaders by self-determining to whom or what they're committed, what they need to know or be able to do, and also when to act. Why is this important? Well, in the 80s and the 90s, Schoen, who wrote a great deal about reflective practice, pointed out that the act of teaching is often based on tacit or unconscious knowledge, skills, and dispositions. And it stands to reason that the knowledge, skills, and dispositions that comprise teacher leadership are also tacit, sort of like riding a bike. Most of us can ride a bike, but if we had to stop and make a step-by-step list of exactly how you go about riding a bike, it's hard for us to do. We do it tacitly, we don't do it consciously. So the 5 features of teacher leadership framework is one way to take that tacit knowledge and skill and disposition of leadership and make it more visible. And if we're to put the self-determination motivators side by side with the 5 features of teacher leadership, it might look something like this. If a teacher is motivated toward connection, the features that would be made visible are student-centered and collaborative. If a teacher is motivated by competence or feeling competent, that would show itself through a positive influence and the act of undertaking self-determination in the first place. If a teacher is motivated by autonomy, it can become visible through the features of action-oriented and beyond one classroom. And I'd like to pause here for a minute and talk a little bit about beyond one classroom, because what I found in that 2022 study that we're focusing on today is that of all of the 5 features, beyond one classroom was the trickiest. It was the most difficult for participants in my study to understand. One of the examples that I share from the teachers that I surveyed for that study is a teacher who, during COVID, when all of her students were at home and before they were meeting together virtually as a class, she decided to put together a customized packet of work for each of her students. So she looked at where her students were and what her students needed related to the standards and the course learning objectives. And she created these paper packets, and she actually drove around and delivered these to her students. So this is a teacher who truly went above and beyond in those early days of COVID-19 to make sure that she was serving her students and doing what she could for them. This particular teacher taught at the middle school level, and so she had several different classes of students, first hour, second hour, third hour, and so on. And so at first glance, it appeared that what this teacher was doing was going above and beyond. And because she taught more than one group of students, her actions were going beyond the classroom. But in reality, according to the 5 features of teacher leadership, this teacher was doing what an outstanding teacher does. This is a teacher who dug in, looked at what her students needed, did what she could to meet that need, and she did it for all of her students. But what she didn't do was take it to the next level, which might have been sharing it with other teachers, talking perhaps to her principal or to her department chair about asking other teachers to do something similar. In that way, she could have moved to the level of teacher leadership and taken the magnificent things that she was doing beyond one classroom. So I went a little bit off topic there, but hopefully that helps you to better understand that particular feature of the framework. So let's talk a little bit more about how we can actually go about using the framework. It actually has to do with Schoen's idea of reflective practice. And we've known since the 90s that teachers and teacher leaders do a lot of reflective practice. Schoen is the person who identified the terms reflection in action, which is in the moment reflection, where a teacher might be standing in front of the classroom teaching and realizes this isn't hitting home. I need to step back. I need to readjust. I need to re-explain. He also identified reflection on action, which has to do with retrospective reflection, looking back at something after the fact and making sense of it and learning from it. More recently, Wilson has identified the concept of reflective planning practice, which is defined as applying new insights moving forward. So in this way, when we're thinking about using reflective practice in teaching and teacher leadership, we can use it for present experiences, past experiences, and even for future experiences. Today, as we self-analyze our acts of teacher leadership, we're going to be focusing on reflection on action, which is retrospective, and we're doing that using storytelling. Kratka said that through stories, we give moral, practical, or aesthetic meaning to situations and are able to better understand ourselves, our broader culture, and our knowledge. A little while ago, each of you wrote down a story, and we'll be able to use that as our means of reflective practice as we reflect on action. A final thought here. Reflective practice is personal and it's often private. It's something that we do individually. And I would say that it's fairly rare that we fully share our personal reflections with others. Therefore, using the 5 features of teacher leadership framework and self-determination guide to engage in reflective practice offers a means of self-directed professional development that can assist teachers in self-determining tacit acts of teacher leadership in a developmentally appropriate and non-threatening manner. And I think that is a key aspect of this particular tool. So, to summarize everything I've been talking about, when teachers have a simple, easy to use tool to self-assess acts of teacher leadership, they are better equipped to develop as leaders by self-determining to whom or what they're committed, what they need to know or be able to do, and when to act, whether it's in the past, the present, or the future. Now it is time to analyze your act of teacher leadership. Please return to your written description of teacher leadership. And if you joined us late, it's not too late. You still have time to think about an act of teacher leadership that you either engaged in yourself or maybe something that you observed or witnessed in someone else. If you were able to find the article, you can go to page 28 in the article and you will find Appendix A, which is where the self-determination guide is located. And I've included the QR code again here so that you can scan and get to the article that way if you'd like to. We're going to see the QR code again in a minute, so if I'm moving forward too quickly, no worries, you'll still have time to use it. Again, we're going to take 3 minutes. And what I'd like you to do is use the 11-question self-determination guide that you'll find on page 28 of the article and also on the next screen to analyze your act of teacher leadership. And here's how you'll do it. Read each question. And for each question, if the answer is yes, and if your written description addresses the question, mark yes. Answer the question with a yes. If the answer to the question is yes, but your written description does not address the question, you have the opportunity to revise your description, add that little detail in, and then mark yes. Answer the question yes. If the answer to the question is no, mark no. So here we go. Again, we're going to take about 3 minutes. On the screen here, you can see the self-determination guide. Take a few minutes to answer questions 1 through 9, and we'll talk in a few minutes about question 10. I'll stop talking. I'll begin my stopwatch. Let's take about 3 minutes to do our self-analysis. All right. If you responded yes to questions 1 through 9, please respond yes to question 10. According to the 5 features of teacher leadership framework and self-determination guide, you have described an act of teacher leadership. If you responded no to any question, please answer question 11 on the worksheet for each of your no responses. And this way, you can reflect reflective practice planning, Wilson's idea of moving forward with your reflection so that you can achieve an active teacher leadership next time. So now, if you are so inclined, please take a minute to type into the chat your answer to this question. Is it teacher leadership? Yes or no? Take a minute to type into the chat right now. I see the responses coming in. I can't actually see the chat right now. I can't wait to look and see. And I will do that as soon as I stop sharing my screen. In just a few minutes, we are going to open things up for question and answer and hopefully some discussion. I would love to hear what you all think about the 5 features of teacher leadership. Before we get to the Q&A, though, I would like to extend an invitation to provide you with 3 FFTL bookmarks. If you would be interested in a bookmark that has the 5 features of teacher leadership visual that you see here on the screen on one side, and on the other side, it has the 11 questions that are on the self-determination guide, I would be happy to send you 3 bookmarks. Email me at my Bradley University email address, which you see on the screen. In the subject line, please put FFTL bookmarks and then provide your full mailing address. If there's any additional information that you'd like to include, you are welcome to include that as well. I would be happy to send you a few bookmarks, maybe one for you to use and a couple for you to share. I want to slowly move through my references just so that we have these listed in the recording of the presentation. And then finally, we've reached the point where it's time for questions, answers, and discussion. Thank you, everyone.